So PrintNightmare is fixed. There's a lot of reporting sensationalism around this update that Microsoft did last week, saying that it failed to fix the vulnerability. That's really, you have to twist the truth to come up with that statement. And I can see where this reporters that wrote stories, I'm going to show one here that he probably took the story to his editor with a certain title on it. And the editor says, no, I'm not going to use that title. I'm going to use this title. It's more sensational. It'll get more reads. And people have been quoting from this article as though it is part of what documents Microsoft's failed fix from last week. And I'm saying, no, it didn't fail. You've got to intentionally overwrite it to call it a failure. I mean, they draw the double lines down the highway to keep us on our side of the lane, but I can still get hit by oncoming traffic if I intentionally veer into the oncoming traffic. I can still get hit. Well, that's what you have to do with PrintNightmare to still become a victim for it. It's just silly that the way this is going. So let's start with this article here, PrintNightmare. Oh, by the way, this video might be kind of long. I am still having a hard time getting my head wrapped around this. But I'm going to show you the content and let you make your own conclusions and see if you come up with a similar conclusion as I. This is from Bleeping Computer. So this is on the date of the Microsoft patch that was released last week. That was Tuesday of last week at 1:56 p.m. So I'm just going to bring up a calendar here. Well, I'm sorry, that was Wednesday. So they released the patch on Tuesday. So computers got the patch. So this article was written on Wednesday by Lawrence Abrams. Lawrence, I think he did a fine job with this article. I think his editor changed the title. I can easily see where Lawrence was probably squirming at that title. Microsoft Incomplete. PrintNightmare patch fails to fix vulnerability if you override it. I think that would be a fair, it's contained in this article itself. And I'm going to show you some other things too. Researchers have bypassed Microsoft's emergency patch for Nightmare vulnerability to achieve remote code execution and local privilege escalation with the official fix installed. So, researchers have bypassed it, okay, with the official fix installed. What did they have to do that? That's the key. Last night, Microsoft released an out-of-band that was supposed to fix PrintNightmare vulnerability that researchers disclosed by accident last month. Now that part about accident last month, Microsoft issued a patch in June to fix the vulnerability 1675. We'll see that number in a little bit if I misstate a little bit. And they actually did not fix the vulnerability properly. So this was an emergency out-of-band fix to complete the job that they did fail in June. And this part about by accident, well, the researchers disclosed how to take advantage of this vulnerability because they thought Microsoft had fixed it. And then shortly after publishing that, they discovered, oops, wait a minute, Microsoft's June fix actually did fail. So they took down that information, but that information had already gotten out to the public. It had already been copied from GitHub. And so that's what it means by being disclosed. After the update was released, security researchers Matthew Hickey, co-founder of Hacker House, and William Dorman, vulnerability analyst, determined that Microsoft only fixed the remote code execution component of the vulnerability. Now, I believe they were talking about the June patch. Let's see. No, this is after the update was... No, I'm sorry. This is after this update from last week was released. Only fix remote code execution component of the vulnerability. So there's two components. Remote code execution and local privilege escalation. We got to talk about those two. I'm going to try to make that become more sensible if that just sounds like total Greek to you. Then, however, malware and threat actors could still use local privilege escalation component. That's the other thing, okay? Local privilege escalation component. That's one part of the vulnerability that we're talking about as compared to the remote code execution component. So remote code execution means from another computer outside of your local network, somebody could remotely execute a program, something to run a program of anything of their choice on your computer, including ransomware or virus, or set up a new account on your computer to be able to access it. So that's remote code execution. And then this local privilege escalation means to be able to escalate the rights of a user within the same local area network to another computer. So that's local privilege escalation. Could still use local privilege escalation component to gain system privileges on vulnerable systems that have the patch, only if the point and print policy is enabled. So the only way they could do this is if the point and print policy is enabled, which is not the default. That is not the default configuration for Windows computer. So you have to have changed this. So when you change from default policies or default registry settings, you're taking on an extra level of liability. Most people haven't done this. Coming down further. Today, as more researchers began modifying their exploits and testing the patch, it was determined that exploits could bypass the entire patch, entirely to achieve both local privilege escalation and remote code execution. Well, that sounds terrible. That sounds horrible. But what do they have to do that? According to such and such, the patch could be bypassed to receive remote code execution when the point and print policy is enabled. Now that's for the remote code execution. What about the other one? Dorman also confirmed this patch bypass to bypass the other vulnerability, to bypass the PrintNightmare patch and achieve RCE and LPE. So RCE is a remote code execution. LP is the local privilege escalation. A Windows policy called point and print restrictions must be enabled, and when installing drivers for a new connection setting configured as do not show warning on elevation prompt. So you've got to go in and change, and this piece I believe is a registry setting. You got to change a registry setting to tell your computer do not show a warning on elevation of privileges prompt. What? Why would somebody who's security conscientious do that? You wouldn't. Which means the patch that Microsoft released last week, it works unless you have twisted things on your computer to this setting. How do you call that Microsoft patch fails? It only fails if you have done these tweaks, which don't sound very responsible. If you've done those kind of tweaks, then you are operating at a level of computer security that you know what you're doing, and you're accepting the liability for it. To put that on Microsoft's shoulders, I'm saying is unreasonable. This policy is located under Computer Configuration Administrator Templates Printers Point and Print Restrictions. When enabled, the no warning elevation on the install value will be set to 1. Under this is a registry setting. So this is showing policies, and this is showing registration or registry. Now, I haven't actually gone in and looked at these yet. I certainly have not modified those settings on this computer. I will do that before the end of this video. Like I said, this video is probably going to be kind of long. And if you don't want to go through it all, but just if you're a normal person or even in a normal computer operation and your IT department doesn't go tweaking these types of settings, then the registry patch from last week is fine for you. And then also, if you, from last week, if you did have printer complications by virtue of that patch, and you reversed that patch or uninstalled it, and you currently don't have that patch, then another piece that I'm intending to put into this video is a quick little batch file that you can put on your desktop to disable the print spooler and then enable the print spooler when you want to print, because that would be the only reasonable next way to protect yourself. But even at that, for this to be utilized by a hacker, so far it doesn't appear that there's any way to automate that. So the only way that's going to work is if the computers that have print spooler enabled in your office are exposed to the internet, or exposed, now that doesn't mean you can go to the internet and browse the internet. That means your IP address of your computer can be pinged from another computer out on the internet. That's kind of a complicated thing to configure. It's not going to happen in your home environment or your small business environment. You have to configure that. Or if a hacker outside your network has already remote access of one of the computers in your office, then they can move laterally to your computer and execute code on that or elevate privileges on that. However, if they've already have control of one of your other computers, you probably have more serious problems than this, and you need to plug that vulnerability. I'm going to come over here to YouTube. This Lawrence Systems, he produces a lot of very good informational videos. I think he kind of fell for this on the wrong side of the I don't want to say truth of this. I mean, he does his research really well, but I think he missed a tweak on this one, to be honest. So this is the Bleeping computer article we were just looking at, and he provides a nice convenient link to the CISA article here. We're going to go look at that. Also some Twitter articles, very useful, but still you have to do a tweak. You have to make some effort to overwrite this patch that Microsoft put out last week. So right click on this CISA article, open a new tab. Let's go look at that one. PrintNightmare Critical Windows Spooler Vulnerability. Original release date June 30th, last revised July 2nd. Now, this title it relates to the original post, not to these more recent ones. So this original post from CISA has to do with the June Microsoft patch, not the July patch. It hasn't come out yet. So what this says here, the CERT Coordination Center, now this is a government agency. CISA, if you're not familiar with, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They operate on the level of FBI, CIA, any of the three-letter institutions to try to protect us. Of course, they get 4 letters. It's more important, so they get 4 letters instead of 3. The CERT Coordination Center has released a vul note for a critical remote code execution vulnerability in the Windows Print Server service, noting, while Microsoft has released an update for 2021-1675, this is the lower number. That number that we looked at earlier was 5 digits. This is the 4-digit number. It's an older, we became aware of it earlier in the year. 2021 refers to the year. 1675 is an early vulnerability that was discovered this year. It's important to realize that this update does not address the public exploits that identify as 2021-1675. So that's the same number. What they're saying here is that Windows released an update for that vulnerability, but they're saying it does not address another public exploit that is also identified under that same vulnerability. This is where the June update that Microsoft did not fix what it was supposed to have fixed. It only fixed half of the problem. An attacker can exploit this vulnerability, nicknamed PrintNightmare, to take control of an affected system. CISA encourages administrator to disable the Windows print spooler service in domain controllers and systems that do not print. Additionally, administrators should employ the following best practice from Microsoft how-to guides published January 11, 2021. Due to the possibility for exposure, domain controllers and Active Directory admin systems need to have this print spooler service disabled. Notice, CISA is not telling us to disable the print spooler service on our local workstations. Why? Are they saying that those computers are not vulnerable to this exploit? Yes and no. I think, I can only read between the lines here because they don't actually state this. I think our local computers with a local printer installed is still vulnerable to these exploits, but it's less likely that that computer is exposed to the internet. It's less likely that there is a public IP address that gets ported to the local computer. However, with domain controllers and domain admins, Active Directory admin systems, it's more likely that those do have a public IP address and they are accessible from outside on the internet, typically because they want system admins to be able to access those systems remotely so that they can monitor them, check for exploits, or do whatever maintenance work they need to do remotely, or even that you might have remote workers that need to connect to the network, and they would typically do it through one of those computers, which also typically don't have printers directly attached to them, so there's no reasonable need for them to have a print spooler active. So CISA is not really worried about local computers because that's kind of a rare thing for them to be exposed. Now let's go look at this vulnerability note. Right click on that one, open a new tab. We get it up here. Microsoft Windows Print Spooler allows for RCE, remote code execution, via add printer driver X. That's a code within programming languages or a function. So this describes how to go about that or how it operates. And basically the way it operates is that if you connect from the outside to a computer that's inside a network and that print spooler service is active, you can try to install a printer so that you can print from the outside to a printer that's connected to that computer. Doesn't matter whether there's actually a printer installed there or not. You can launch the add printer command, and then there's a point where you can specify where you want it to load the driver from. And a hacker could tell it to load the driver from the hacker's computer. And that driver file that the server assumes has printer commands in it actually has any other programming code that the hacker wants to put on that computer. And then when the hacker tries to engage that printer, it runs that code, which could be ransomware or a virus or this remote code execution. So that's, in a nutshell, for non-technical people, how it works. And in this environment, I consider myself a non-technical person. So let me give that disclaimer. Now let's go back a little bit. I'm going to pause the video here and formulate my next approach. And that's something that I do in these kinds of videos. Not scripted, and not a bunch of editing. So if you don't like that kind of video, then don't watch my videos. Be back in a moment. So I'm going to continue with going to look at what did Microsoft actually say about this update that they released last week. Now keep in mind that there was a registry setting and there's a group policy thing that you had to set a certain way in order to override this patch from Microsoft. Well, now here's 2020 on the catalog.update.microsoft.com. I did a search for 2021-07 Cumulative, and I just limited it to 21H1 because otherwise I get a whole bunch of stuff. Now it's interesting to me that I have looked at this earlier today, and we only had the July 6 updates. We did not have a cumulative update for today, which it appears that that's what is there now. It's dated yesterday, that the update was updated yesterday, but it did not show up on this search for 2021-0H a few hours ago when I checked. A couple hours ago, whatever it was. So, and it's interesting, it's a different KB number, because I would have expected more likely that they would have just updated this 4945 by making whatever changes to it and updating it. But they came up with another KB number. Interesting that this KB number is a lower number than the one that they gave us last week. So these two right here are identical in the sense that they're 21H1 for x64 based systems. So are we going to find, let's see, and the one came out for July 12th is slightly larger. So does this one show as being superseded by 4237? So I'm going to click on this one and come in here to package details, has been replaced by 4237, sure enough. So they want that older KB number to replace the one that was installed last week. That's interesting. So that has not shown up on my radar yet until actually I'm recording this video. So we're going to go look at the details of that. First, I want to show you the details of the one they issued last week, because that is really interesting. So I'm doing a right click and then choose open a new tab. And that gets us over to this, where'd it go? 4945, open a new tab. That's not working. I guess I'm going to have to just do a left click on it. 21H1, 4945, left click. Oh, okay, that's right. Yes, that's how, that makes sense. And I just showed you this a moment ago. But what I want to go into now is this more information. So they always produce and provide more information about any of their updates. Now, if you are the IT department in a large corporation, you're supposed to be pre-testing patches that are coming to you. You should be reading this. So the people that are really security conscious should be reading this kind of stuff. So this gives more information. That was an out-of-band update. And we scroll down here, and they make a mention down here, updates a remote code execution exploit in the Windows Print Spooler service known as PrintNightmare, as documented in the CVE number. Now, I think I can right-click on that one and open a new tab because I like to be able to come back to it. Let's go look at this. This is the Windows Print Spooler remote code execution vulnerability. So when you read that CVE number, here's where you're going to get more detail about that. And this is the 34527. 34527, yeah. Here's an executive summary. So what do they say about it? Exists when Windows Print Spooler service improperly performs privileged file operations. Attackers successfully exploit this vulnerability could run arbitrary code with system privileges. An attacker could then install programs, view, change, or delete data, create new accounts with full user rights, and of course also install ransomware. Updated July 7th, a security update for, okay, so those versions of the software didn't come out right away. So that's an update that they are saying has been released. Please see security updates for applicable update for your system. Recommend install these updates immediately if you're unable to install such and such. In addition, here's the key thing. In addition to installing the updates in order to secure your system, you must confirm that the following registry settings are set to 0 and are not defined. Note, these registry keys do not exist by default, so they don't exist until somebody goes in and creates them. If you go in and create them and you change them from 0, you can override this patch. That's exactly what I showed you back in the Bleeping computer article. There were security researchers. The way they bypassed it was to do these things that Microsoft said, don't do this. So the security researchers that figured out a way to get around it, Microsoft told them how to get around it. Come on. These registry keys do not exist by default, therefore are already at the secure setting. The way Microsoft provided the operating system to us, it's already secure. Also that your group policy settings are correct. So the items here, here's this H key point in print. That needs to be at 0, and no warning elevation on install needs to be 0 or not defined. Update prompt settings needs to be 0 or not defined. Having no warning, no elevation on install set to 1 makes your system vulnerable by design. It's intended to have that capability there for people who know what they're doing and who need that. And these security researchers are telling us, well, we can get around Microsoft's patch by making these changes here. Microsoft told you that. The patch was successful. July 6th update. Microsoft has completed Now, I'm not saying Microsoft is all-knowing and right. Of course, in the June update, they failed. They just did fail. But not this time. And now once we're on the bandwagon of hating Microsoft about PrintNightmare, when it was publicized that you can bypass this patch by doing those things, it's just sensationalism, just like any reporting environment. Microsoft has completed the investigation, released security updates to address this vulnerability. Please see security updates, yada, 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 yada. Released on or after June 6th, provide protection. So here's the 1675. See, this was about that 5-digit number, whatever it was. Security updates released on or after July 6th contain protections for 1675, the additional remote code execution exploit, Windows print spooler service known as PrintNightmare, and there's that 5-digit number. I think I kind of muddled the way I was describing those two CVE numbers. Okay, because I'm going to pause again and formulate my next piece here. And I'm back, and I'm kind of laughing at myself here. I told you that my videos are not scripted, but I do use an outline on occasion. So for what I've done so far in this video, this is my outline right here. During this break, I added a little bit more, and I just did a Control X, so Control V to put it back and show you what else I have intended for the rest of this video. Go look at the new cumulative update, tell about printer crashes that have occurred from the last update, or appear to be from the last update. Look at the Registry and Group Policy settings to show that they don't even exist on my computer. I haven't gone to look at them, but like we saw in that article, they're not even present by default. So I don't think they'll be there. And then to show how to create a batch file to enable and disable, or disable the spooler and enable it. So that if you have a computer that you do think may be vulnerable and you didn't get that patch because that patch caused you some trouble or you're just nervous about it, then I'm going to show you how to create a batch file to double click on your desktop to disable the print spooler, and then another double click to enable it. When you want to print something, after you finish printing, you disable it. So that is a way to protect you. So here's another pause. Unpause, and now we're back at the catalog, the update catalog, and we're going to take a look at this brand new update that just got posted today. It was not present on here earlier today when I looked, and I haven't looked at it yet. So we're going to go discover this together. So language security updates, 1903 and others. Some of this stuff here is just, it always says AMD 64, no matter what. So they don't really fix any of that. So this update has been replaced by nothing. This update doesn't replace, it replaces 4945. So if you got the 4945, then you're supposed to install this one. If you skipped 4945 or you uninstalled it, then you can install this one today and see how that goes. I don't know why you uninstalled the 4545 or prevented it. If you prevented getting it, if you prevented the computer from downloading that because you thought that it wasn't going to fix the problem, turns out that's wrong. It does fix the problem unless you've done those tweaks. So over here, more information on support URL. These are exactly the same URL address. So we'll go look at that and find out what is this 4237. It's not an out of band update, right? Because this is update Tuesday. And it looks like it includes all versions of Windows, whereas the other one, I think, did not originally include some versions. And so then these all include the flash removal package. Every time we get an update, it removes flash. If you're trying to get that, if you're trying to keep that, you got to do something else to accomplish that. For more information about, no, we don't care about that. Publish, follow Windows Update. To see information published, highlights, updates for verifying usernames and passwords, updates improve security when Windows performs basic operation, update an issue that might make printing to certain printers difficult. This issue affects various brands and models, but primarily receipt and label printers that connect using a USB port. So it could be that some of the people that complained about printing, which I'm going to show you who reported that to me, it may be that this solves those issues and that those issues became apparent because of the 4945 update. What I'm going to do here is go to my YouTube channel. So in the address bar, I'll type youtube.com and then /LWTDB. That gets you to my channel. LWTDB is the acronym for my channel. My channel name, Live Windows Training DougBetts, LWTDB. Get you to my channel. So then if we go look at videos and looking for that video that I put about will the patch cause the troubles? And that is the one where we have some comments. Okay, I'm going to pause this and come down to the comments and see what some people said. Pretty nice. After applying this fixed patch, things seem to have slowed down. Some programs like BlueStacks got a drastic downgrade in performance. I updated the patch. Now my printer won't work. My scanner doesn't work. Nice going, Microsoft. Luckily, I created a restore point. However, it still didn't fix the problem. I had to delete and uninstall the printer and scanner software and reinstall. Way to go to Microsoft. Doug, this patch was applied for me this morning. Messed up my Outlook data file dating back to 2014, so I had to recover from backup. Everything is working fine now. Let's see, there's 5 replies there. Was there something else that worth mentioning? No. Let's see, Ada says, tried stopping the service and that just removed all the printers, could not print, restarted the service. So this is when I discovered this comment and somebody else's comment is when I discovered that you can't just turn off the print spooler and still be able to print. My understanding was you could, but that is wrong. Then here, hump. So last week when I tried printing something, I got a blue screen to death. Now I'm trying to figure out what happened. This must have been the problem. So this was 1 day ago, so yesterday. So apparently she, after the update received last week, she got a blue screen of death when trying to print and is figuring this is what the trouble was. So in that event, if you just install the update for today, that's probably going to fix it because it told us that that's part of this patch that's out today is to fix some printers that have trouble with last week's patch. Let's say you don't patch. What's the exposure? This would be great follow-up on YouTube. So I did give him a response for Paul. I said at that point in time 2 days ago, most people aren't exposed. You have to have print services exposed to the internet or have a highly experienced hacker with other access to your network. I may do a follow-up video for that. I guess I am doing that. And status of the Microsoft patch and the side effects that have been reported. I'm undecided on that. Oyster says had the same question. This one is not specific to the issue. There's a lot. This is a frequent commenter on my channel. I don't think there's anything in there that we need to actually talk about. Oh yeah. I have a question. Is the update 4945 going to affect any future updates? And my response to that, I don't know that for sure, but this update is titled as the July cumulative update, and as such could mean there won't be an update next week, meaning today. On Update Tuesday, updates in subsequent months should continue the pattern of being cumulative, which means if you postpone updates beyond the second Tuesday of August, then you likely will get the August update and entirely skip the July update, since all of the July content will be in the August update. Let's see, another question. Should I install the 45 update? Should I uninstall the 4945 update? Looks like, oh yes, I said there's no need to uninstall it if you're not having troubles that you suspect are related to that update. Okay, thanks for the response. I seem to have a bunch of printer problems since Windows 10 21H1. I have a brand new HP printer. Sometimes I get a red X in the system tray. Scan to computer is disabled. I have uninstalled and reinstalled, and the issue seems to show up when it wants to. But even before I had issues, it would just not print. I accidentally installed 4945, but I have uninstalled it. Before I accidentally installed 4945, I had an issue. Printer would not print. I was trying to print a bank statement. It just would not print. I uninstalled the printer, reinstalled it. It would print a text on a text document, but the bank statement on PDF when I tried to print the statement. Okay, so this sounds like this Chris is having a problem with printing PDFs. Somehow Windows 10, when the printer is installed, and I checked HP Office, but I did notice print option set to fax, took the bank statement, put it on a flash drive. Windows 7 printed just fine to the printer, so I blame Windows 10. I think there's actually a configuration issue for Adobe Acrobat Reader that's causing the problem there. So let's see, Chris, did I already give you some response on that? Try opening Adobe Acrobat Reader first and select Printer, open your PDF and Reader and print. Try updating Adobe Acrobat Reader. There are other variations that could be the solution, but look closer to Adobe Print functions and do Google searches along those lines. Since Word prints okay. I think since Windows 10 prints okay through Microsoft Word, I don't think we're going to blame Windows 10 on that. Nice video, then you can't print. Okay, so yeah, Brian is saying, yeah, you can't print with the print spooler turned off. It used to be the case that you could print without print spooler. At least that's how I remember it. And a trusted Windows journalist reported that as well. 2 of them did. Based on your comment, I just tested, was unable to print, even with the printer directly connected by USB cable. Okay, so there's printing troubles that have been happening since 4945. And I have a fairly small following, so there's got to be a lot more out there that didn't report on my video, because that video has only received 1,384 views. For my channel, that's a lot, but for this issue worldwide, that's not a lot of views. So out of that number of views, how many people had printer troubles, and of those, how many of them chose to bother putting a comment on my video? That kind of indicates I think there's a lot of printer troubles. And this patch today looks like it's going to fix some of that. So now I'm going to pause for a little prep work for the next segment. So now we're going to go check on those settings on my computer. So we're coming back to this document that I showed you a little bit ago. This is on Microsoft's website. It's about this CVE 34527. We're going to go check and see how my computer is set for these issues. Let's see, I went down too far here. Yeah, here. This is the part for the registry. So to check on the registry, I'm going to triple click on this registry location, press Control-C to copy it. Then I'll do Windows key R and type regedit. It was already in there. I could have just pressed the enter key. Then I'll press left arrow key, enter for the user account control. I'll click up here in the address bar and do Control-A to highlight the word computer there, and then Control-V to paste that path. Press the enter key. It goes straight to that location in the registry. Drag this to the side a little bit, and I look for the most expanded section. So that indicates that we're looking for down here. So when I see Windows NT, I'll click on that, and then that puts that in this address bar up here. So Windows NT, where is that point here? So in the Windows NT registry key, it wants me to find the printers key. There is no printers folder in there. Am I saying that right? New key, yeah, because it's a folder. The items that are within a key are values. So it's not there, and Microsoft told us it's not there by default. So if the printer's item was there, then I would go into the point and print item and then set a value for no warning, no elevation on install, and they want that to be set to 0. In order to bypass the patch, I have to change that to 1. And then I'd also have to put in this registry key, update prompt settings, and set it to something other than 0. I don't have those registry keys. By default, they're not there. So to bypass this patch, you have to do that tweaking to the registry. Microsoft fixed the problem. Okay? Yes, the researchers can get around it by tweaking the registry. That doesn't count. Pausing again. Scrolling a little bit lower on this same document, there's workarounds here. So workarounds you could implement if you, for some reason, don't want to use the update 4945. So determine if the print spooler service is running. They're showing PowerShell commands here. There's other ways that you could accomplish this. And then disable the print spooler service. So this is what we've been told. A workaround is to disable the print spooler. Impact of the workaround: disabling the print spooler service disables the ability to print both locally and remotely. So under all circumstances, whatever I'm remembering from the past is in the past. You could also, option number 2, that was option number 1. Option number 2, disable inbound remote printing through group policy. So this shows how to do it through group policy, and then the impact of that will block the remote attack vector by preventing inbound remote printing operations. The system will no longer function as a print server, but local printing directly to attached device will still be possible. So that is a workaround. And then coming down here further, they have more information. This is Microsoft providing this information. Is this the vulnerability that has been referred to publicly as Nightmare? Yes. 34527, Microsoft assigned that number to it. Is this vulnerability related to 1675? It's similar but distinct from the vulnerability that is signed as 1675. The attack vector is different as well. 1675 was addressed by the security update released June 8th. So the security update that they released June 8th did protect against a certain portion of the vulnerability. The criticism Microsoft was hit with back then was that they only, the researcher that discovered the vulnerability, some of the reports that I heard, and this is third hand, is that Microsoft only patched the specific example that the researcher had presented. But what Microsoft is saying here is that it's a different attack vector, and Microsoft is the one who assigns these CVE numbers. They are the authority on what CVE number is applying to what vulnerability. So that is what Microsoft is saying about that. I know that can be argued. I know some people are going to argue that this 1675 should have been covering both of those vulnerabilities. And maybe this is a way for Microsoft to cover their backside because they missed it. They messed up. I haven't done enough research along those lines to have an opinion about that. At this point, I don't care because both problems are resolved. Did the June 2021 update introduce this vulnerability? No, it existed before. All versions of Windows listed in the security updates table are all versions vulnerable. Basically answer is yes. What vulnerabilities do the security updates address? I'm not going to read through all these. Domain controllers, client system, members of domain, C attack, house point and print. So there's a lot of questions and answers in here directly from Microsoft. This is the source that you need to go to. Now, it doesn't mean that it's foolproof or non-errant. They can have errors, they can make mistakes. But I think they've been getting an undeserved heavy rap over this because it's their fix last week did fix it. You can find your way around, you can program your way around that patch, yes, but that's an unreasonable thing to do. Update, CVSS, do we need any of this? We don't need any of this. I think I need to pause to set up the next portion because here I think we've finished all of that. So here's a while I was maneuvering to the next piece that I want to talk about, I came across this screen and realized there was a piece that I missed mentioning here. This was CISA's original post, June 30th, and that is what generated this title. After that June 30th post, a couple days later, they provide these updates telling us to go look at these items for Microsoft's guidance. It is significant to note here that CISA has not updated this in response to the patch that was issued last week to patch Nightmare. So if that patch actually failed, this article should have been updated, and it hasn't been. So these two updates had to do with July 1st and July 2nd. Now, that is showing for 2021 34527. Are these two links different? Looking down in the bottom right corner, vulnerability, then it has the CVE number. Those two are the same. So they've got these two listings pointing to the same URL. I'm kind of thinking that might have not have been the original thing that they posted on July 1st. Right? Update guide, vulnerability, look in the bottom left corner, 2021 34527. Those are identical. So right click here, open a new tab, and go see what that was referring to, because I think we've already looked at this. So this was updated July 8th. This is the one that we've been looking at that we talked about, that print spooler service there. And let's see, this is the one that had the, oh yeah, here, this is what took us to the registry items. So CISA has not added anything to their statement since the update that Microsoft released last week, which means by lack of anything else there, they're approving of it. Okay, pausing again. So here we're back at the Bleeping Computer article that I showed earlier. This paragraph: to bypass the PrintNightmare patch and receive RCE and LPE, a Windows policy called point and print restrictions must be enabled. And when installing drivers for a new connection, setting configured as do not show warning on elevation prompt. So both of these have to be done on the local computer or that computer in your network before the criminals out there can use this exploit to get to your computer. So scrolling down, we see the way to do that. This policy is located under this location in Policy Editor. When it is enabled, when that policy is enabled, then the no warning, no elevation on install value will be set to 1 under, and this is a registry setting. We already saw in my registry is that this item is not even there. This registry key is not even there. Therefore, this policy I know cannot possibly be set that way, because setting this policy the way that it needs to be set will create this registry item. So let's go take a look at Policy Editor. So I'm pressing, and this is accessible on Windows 10 Pro. Windows 10 Home Policy Editor is not available unless you jump through some other hoops. So Windows key, policy, and that shows a search result there of Edit Group Policy. At the top, I'll press Enter. That gets me into here. I'm going to drag this off to the side a little bit so we can see that we're going to Computer Configuration, Administrator Templates. So here's Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, and then Printers right here, and then go to Point and Print Restrictions. These are not in alphabetical order. I'll click on the column heading to put them in alphabetical order, and then scroll down to Point and Print Restrictions. This item is here in Group Policy. Now, previously we said in the registry, it's not going to be, by default, it's not there. But this is the Policy Editor. By default, this option is here, but by default, it's not configured. I can double click on that, or I can expand this window to show over here, it's not configured. That's far enough. I've done all I need to do. If you want to bypass that patch, I don't know why why would you? You would have to enable this. So by default, unless you've done these weird extra things on your computer, last week's patch does solve the problem. Does solve the problem. You have to be jumping through hoops to get around it. So that the verbiage that we got on articles and YouTube videos saying things like the patch leaves the system vulnerable. No, it does not. Just does not. Okay, another pause. Okay, so now for the last part of my so-called outline, batch file disable spooler. I'll do Windows key D to get to the desktop. Right click on the desktop. We're going to create a couple batch files right on the desktop. Of course, you could put them somewhere else if you chose to. So I choose new, and then I'm going to go text document and put in the name of this document for spool stop, I'll call it. And then I want to delete the period.txt and change that to period.bat. And press enter and press enter to answer yes to that. Then right click on that and choose edit. And then we're going to create some text in here. Let's put this Windows key right arrow and then up arrow to put it up here in the upper right corner. And I'm going to do Windows key V because I already have the text of this in the paste buffer or clipboard buffer, I'll call it. For SC stop spooler and then SC config spooler start disabled. So this is going to not only stop the print spooler but also disable it. Now to see this happening, I'm going to do Windows key R and services.msc, which is already there because that's what I most recently did. And then I've already got it kind of in the upper left corner. Then I'll click on any one of these items and type PR. That'll get me close to print spooler. It'll get me right on print spooler, and it is running and it is automatic. So here I've put in this text, and I'll go to the file menu and choose save, and that saves it as that. So here we have that content in here. I'll right click on it and choose run as administrator. You have to run it as administrator, it's just not going to work. So I click on that, answer yes to the user account control, and because I have that pause command in here, we can see that the stop spooler succeeded, and we can see that the change service config succeeded. So press any key to continue. That makes that window goes away. This still says running on automatic until I come up here to the action menu and choose refresh, and we see the print spooler service is not running and it is disabled. So now let's create the other one. I'm going to control drag this icon over to the right and let go of the mouse button first, and I'm going to change the name of that to spool start and get rid of the word copy. So of course you're going to have to type this text out, or I'll probably put it into the description of this video, and that way you can just copy and paste if you want to. Now I'll right click on that and choose edit and bring this over to the right side. If I move it all the way over to the right, then it bounces up and takes the whole right half of the screen. So here, this is spool start. So I'm going to Control A to select all of that, Windows key V, and then choose the option in here that I have already copied. So it's SC config spooler change, so changing the configuration to automatic and starting it, and the pause command. So then I'll save that. So here I have my spool start and my spool stop. So I'll right click on spool start and choose run as administrator, answer yes. And we get a pause command here so I can see that this one succeeded and this one up here succeeded. Press any key. So if I look at print spooler here right now, it's not updated yet. So when I go to the action menu and choose refresh, now we see that it is running and that it is automatic. So that's a quick, easy way for you to put those two icons on your desktop and just enable the print spooler when you want to print. And that way you're protected against this vulnerability if you have chosen not to install last week's patch or this week's Update Tuesday patch, because this week is a cumulative update, so it's going to include what was contained in last week's patch, but it has some fixes for the printers that had troubles. So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Of course, 15 minutes after the end of this video, I'm going to remember something else that I intended to say and forgot to. Oh well, that's the problems with not having a scripted video. So it's 3:13 p.m. I've been doing editing on this video. I mentioned before I don't do a lot of editing, but a little bit. And then it came time for the Security Now show to start with Steve Gibson, and it was time for lunch. So I watched through the first portion live. Security Now, eager to see if Steve was on the same line of thinking that I am, and he's not. He's convinced Microsoft has this wrong, and he showed his detailed reasons for it. And I hate to publish a video that contradicts him, and also Tom Lawrence for that matter. I love the work that both of those guys do. Tom Lawrence of Lawrence Systems is the YouTube video that I showed earlier that said, I don't think he's got it right. Well, Steve Gibson, I don't think he's got it right either. So I'm going to show you a couple of the main things that where I see it in what he said. Is he was making reference to these registry settings and really focused in on this statement here, vulnerable by design. It even was poking fun at Microsoft. Maybe that's a new tagline for Microsoft, vulnerable by design, and I think he severely misunderstood that. This is not Microsoft's design. This is having no warning elevation set to 1. If you do that, Microsoft is saying, if you do that, that makes your system vulnerable by design. Your design, the technician who did that, if you change that setting on your computers to be that way, then you're making your system vulnerable, not Microsoft. Also, during his presentation, Steve implied and pretty much stated that these registry settings have to be set in order to be able to use point and print. No, they do not. This computer that I was showing you my settings on, I have used point and print on it, and what that allows me to do is to connect to a printer that's on another computer. It's behind that closet right there, without having to go install drivers. It can pull the drivers off of another computer. I do that all the time, and that does not change these registry settings. These registry settings, as I showed you, they don't even exist until you want to go in and override Microsoft's by default secure settings. There's a lot of things you can do in the registry to change the way Windows operates, different than what Microsoft intended and designed. And this is one of them. The only way that the criminals out there on the internet can use this exploit to compromise your computer is if you're a technician on your side, or you as a computer user make those changes. Why would you ever want to do that? Well, I think it could be because in a corporate environment, one computer wants to print to another one, and that can be done without changing these settings. But they don't want warning messages coming up, right? What does this actually say? No warning on elevation on install. So what are they doing? Preventing a user account control pop-up from coming up? Some kind of warning, are you sure you want to do this? I think what these registry settings do is they override that to prevent that from happening, to reduce the number of clicks that a technician has to do when they're going around setting up a whole bunch of these. Not sure about if that's the reason. But those are the registry settings that the researchers had to set this way. And I think maybe they did that because Microsoft let it be known that you could defeat this security patch by doing that. So, okay, so I added this extra piece. I'm going to go ahead and tag this onto the rest of the video and publish it and see where it goes. I wouldn't mind being wrong if I'm proved to be wrong. And if you find any substance to why I'm wrong, put it in the comments, please. But for all I can see, this PrintNightmare is solved. It's fixed. Okay. I hope this has been useful. Let's go to here. Here's my email address if you want to reach out to me for anything. What I typically do on my channel, why I created my channel, is to be able to help people remotely with their computer issues. So we do a Zoom session. I connect remotely to your computer and fix whatever needs fixing during live streams on YouTube. And there's a whole bunch of people that join me in the chat room, some really smart people that help with figuring out what solutions are to whatever problems we come up against. So if you're interested in that, you can send me an email requesting such a session. And that'll do it. I hope this has been useful. Have a great day. Catch you later. Goodbye.